Oh my, what a jumper. Hi. You gonna go get a lizard? Go ahead, go get a lizard. Hi everybody, it's Robert Earl out here at the Eco Ranch Sustainable Living Education Center in far west Texas, along with Eco, the Eco watchdog who has gone totally insane, is in only concerned with hunting lizards. She has yet to catch one. She hasn't caught any. Going to do a video today about making an air dryer. Now, there's videos all over about dehydrators, air dryers, things like that. I want to add one to it because, honestly, we got 18,000 people that have subscribed to the channel, and some of you may be interested in my version of an air dryer. Now, air drying and dehydrating are two different things. Dehydrating uses heat to remove moisture from whatever, be it beef jerky, tomatoes, or parsley. A air dryer uses air or sunlight and air. You do have to have the ability to have the breeze go through. You do have to have some sunlight. Now behind me, and I'll show you in a second, behind me is the countertop that I use for my air drying. I've used it very successfully in the past, but the air dryer that I'm using is this, and this is my screen for screening my sand. So it wasn't built for this. It's way too big. Because of the success I had the last few days with an air dryer I built, I'm going to replace this here. Still going to use it to screen with, but I'm going to replace it with a better built one. Now when I say better built, we're going to build a version like this, but it's going to be the size that'll fit on the table here. Right now, drying, we have above my head dill that did get rained on last night. I didn't really believe it was going to rain, so we had a little bit of rain. The dill will dry perfectly because we have low humidity here. And I've got my ghost pepper harvest here. There's no way in the world we could eat one whole ghost pepper with a meal. We just couldn't do it. So we have to dry them, grind them up, and use the powder a few grains at a time. If you do that with ghost pepper, it's delicious. If you try to be a macho man, all you do is prove to another idiot that you're a bigger idiot than he is. Ghost pepper, far better to use to cook with than a habanero. I hate habaneros. Ghost peppers are great, but you use only a little bit. In moderation, you get the heat you want, not the heat that Joe the dummy with the missing front tooth wants you to have. So, let's get going on my new dehydrator. I've got to make my measurements and get my material together, and we'll get going. Okay, so the measurement I want to get to is 2 feet by 3 feet, so that means I need 2 pieces of 2x4 that are 3 feet long each, or 6 feet, and 2 that are 24 inches long, or 2 feet. So that's 1 2x4, and I'm going to have to use 8 screws to hold it together. So there's my cost, 1 2x4 and 8 screws. Take your pick, whatever 2x4s are selling for where you live right now, as the prices come down from the rapist prices they gave us a few months ago. Now the frame is all screwed together, and most people could quit right here. You'd be just fine if you did. I just want to be a tiny bit fussier. I don't know what it is whenever I'm cutting 45s, but I always end up biting a tiny bit off. I'm like maybe a 30-second off on a couple of these corners. So what I'm going to do is run them through the saw and straighten up that. Now, what I've done is I've set the saw for really almost a half a blade length less than what the size of the thickness of these 2x4s is. That will take it down and even it right up. Then I've got another step that's probably the most important step that I'll show you in just a couple minutes. Now, as I said, the next step is about the most important one. I have the one side that I just trimmed off. Now, the bottom side here, it doesn't sit even, flat. Now, that's partially to do with my lumber, which has been sitting a while, but at best it twists some in this humidity anyway. It'll twist and warp a little bit. So it doesn't sit super flat. It's got a little wobble to it. Wobble's acceptable to most people, but let's try something else. I made sure that these lower screws that I put in were high enough where they weren't in my way in terms of cutting. And I'm just checking here. No, absolutely correct. What I'm going to do is run it through at about 3 1/8 inches. And at 3 1/8, I'm going to cut off a decent piece of the trim all the way around. And that piece, I'll show you what I'm going to do with it, but what it's going to do, and I could have just shaved a little bit, but I'm taking off a decent piece for a specific reason. Then when I get done cutting this, it'll sit perfectly flat, and wait till you see the next step. Now then, the next step is to attach the screen to the frame. And if you're like me, and you hate using one of those staplers, I bought an electric one. It was not very expensive at all, and you got to turn it on before you use it. But the electric one really lets you do the job. And you're not scrimping and maybe making your gap a little bit too wide, because you're thinking about how hard, bleh. Yeah, that. You're thinking about how tired your hand is going to be when you finish. And of course, you almost always have to go back around with a hammer just to make sure those staples get all the way in. And it's important in this case because the next step is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of clever. So what I'm going to do is go around and trim the screen down just a tiny bit inside the wood line, and I'll come back with the last step. Now remember I said I cut this down to about 3 1/8. Why did I cut it down to 3 1/8 so I had that much extra material? Well, why cut a new 2x4 or have to piece things together when you can get a perfect fit that way? It's important that you do this because, as I said, this is galvanized. Last thing I need is for Debbie to come out and want to pick this thing up and pick it up and slice her hand on that sharp galvanized threads. So I'm gonna go ahead and attach these. Now you could staple them. I'm gonna go ahead and screw them with little 1.5" screws. Screw these trim pieces into place, sand them, we're done. Be right back. And so folks, the project is done. Now, the first thing we're going to dry on this drying rack is going to be these ghost peppers, so let's set them aside right at the moment. First of all, if you're going to have a drying rack or a drying element, you've got to have something for the thing you're drying to sit on. So what I did, again, this is all stuff I had laying around. In fact, I picked a lot of it out of the garbage or the firewood pile. So what I have here, piece of 1/4 inch hardware cloth that we'd used and wasn't good for anything else. Got that 1/4 inch hardware cloth there. I'm going to take and transfer my peppers over to that. And these are ghost peppers. Yeah, I'd like to know why they call them ghost peppers. Does anybody have an idea? Put that in the comments if you have an idea as to why they're called ghost peppers. Okay, we got the ghost peppers there. Now I'll show you the finished dryer. Because I was doing it to show you guys on the videos, of course I sanded it so that we didn't get any splinters. I finished it off with linseed oil. Remember, it's going to be touching your food, so you want a food grade finish on it. So I just used linseed oil. And there we are, a nice dryer. It's not a dehydrator, it's a dryer. Works perfect out here for sun drying, but like I saw one of the videos that was talking about air drying as opposed to dehydrating, you can, even if you live in New Orleans or anywhere where it's humid, you can do drying like this. You know, it takes, with the exception of the peppers like this, it takes maybe 2 days, possibly 3 days to dry something thoroughly. So you want to look at your weather forecast, make sure you don't have any rain or heavy clouds coming. Go ahead and set everything out in your dryer. It'll work just as good as this. It won't be quite as fast, but like I always say, the ox is slow, but the earth is patient. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this. There'll be a lot more coming. For now, it's Robert Earl out here at the Eco Ranch Sustainable Living Educational Center in Far West Texas saying, we'll see you later.